All right, so for this lesson, we're going to learn how to manage tables. And the first thing that we're going to learn to do is how to resize rows or columns. Now, if you look at this table, you'll see, for example, this third row right here, that this last name of Harrington is not wide enough for the text to be displayed so that it'll all fit on one line. So what you'd want to do is you can resize these columns by taking your mouse and moving it on top of the right border of the column that you want to resize until your I-beam, as you see here we've got an I-beam, until it becomes a, I guess you could say, a double I-beam with arrows pointing in the opposite direction. Now when you get that, now in the desktop version of Microsoft Word, you can double click this border with your mouse and it would automatically resize. It's actually called Autofit, but you cannot Autofit in the desktop version. So what you would have to do is to click, hold, and drag until you see all of that text on one line. Now, if you'll notice, it also changes some of these other columns. So basically the best thing to do is to go, and if you want all of this text to appear on one line throughout, you're going to have to go through and base it upon the longest line of text in each cell or in each column. So what I want to do is I'm just going to manually go through here and I'm going to change this, and you see how this as I scroll down I can see that now. See, I still don't have everything on one line here. And you know, there's a couple different ways you could do this. You could even start down here on the end, and if you wanted to start with the last column, you could do it like this. And as I look at the text in this table, this is probably not all going to fit, so all the text is together on one line. So, and that's perfectly okay. Now, again, remember, we're having to teach this lesson, or you're going to be learning this lesson based upon the online version of Word, and there's some things that the original lesson asks you to do that we can't do. So I'm going to move over to the second column to the right, and I want to make this a little bit wider until all of my dates appear on one line together. Now, the third column, and as you can see, you see that when I resize that column, then suddenly this column is narrow again. And part of the reason for that is because we don't have full control of this table like we would normally have in the desktop version. So there's no harm in dragging this out. And notice my mouse is still moving. I'm clicking, holding, and dragging. But what's happening is when I get to the right margin of this document, which it's got 1-inch margins on the left and right, this table won't get any wider. And again, in this case, you're just going to have to play with it to make it so that this looks the way you want it to look. And see now how May 12 is on one line by itself, and it looks better as you scroll down. And again, you can keep resizing this if you want. And again, we may have to go back and make some changes and make it more narrow. And for this part of the lesson, I really don't care too much, exactly the width. Although I do think that this phone number here, I would think that that needs to all fit on one line, which means we need to make this a little bit wider so we can make this wider. And again, you're just going to have to keep playing with it. So remember, to make something wider, you have to click, hold, and drag. I think it's more important in this case for this phone number, all of the numbers, all of the digits to be on one line. And I think it's important that the first names, all of the names be on one line together. So again, you just have to keep manipulating this until it looks pretty decent. There's not a lot of data, not a lot of information in this last column out here, so text can be stacked on that. And again, it's just a matter of personal preference. So again, you just have to spend a little time with it. And again, remember, in the desktop version, it would be a lot easier to go through and make these changes that we're wanting to make. And again, as I change that, you see that the names Now it looks like they all, except for this one right here, we have to make this a little bit wider. And then that makes this a little bit more narrow, which means you got to make this wider. And I'll be honest with you, in reality, I would think this wouldn't even be the worst thing in the worst idea in the world if you left this phone number like this, because at least you've got them separated by the various parts of the phone number. And again, basically, you just want to look through this and see if you can live with the end result. So again, this is not the method that there are easier methods of doing this if you're actually doing this with the desktop version. And remember, if you were to click this button and you're using a Chromebook, now I'm not using a Chromebook, and so now it's going to open up the file and it's going to show you what this would look like if you tried to edit this in the desktop version. But if you've got a Chromebook, or if you've got a Macintosh, or if you've got any computer and you don't have Microsoft Word installed on it, you're not going to be able to open that up, because you got to have that program on it to open the desktop version. So this is going to go through, and you see here it's taking me back here. And I didn't save any changes to that document when I just opened it, so this should still look pretty good. And again, I know I'm spending a lot of time talking and not actually doing a whole lot, but you need to understand how the software works. So that's what I'm explaining. Now, you can do the same thing with the columns or with the row height. You could come through here and let's see here. Maybe in this case it's not letting us. So apparently you cannot change row height. If you change a column width, you see right here how I get that double bar with the double arrows, and you should be able to do the same thing with your rows, but it's looking like that you can't do that with your rows. So that is going to be well, part of the reason is because the row heights are based upon the longest entry in all of the rows. So for example, here, you look here for this fourth coffee, you see that this text, it's on 3 lines. So this entire row has to be the height appropriate for this text to fit in. So that's another important point to make when you're when you're creating a table in Microsoft Word, whether it be the online version or the desktop version. And in the desktop version, you can actually make a row a specific height or a column a specific width. So if you wanted a row to be 2.5 inches tall, you could click it in here. Then there would be a button up here under the table design, where you can take it, actually I think it would be under table layout, where you would make it a specific size that you wanted it to be. So again, that's just one of the things. Remember what I've told you before, this is the free version. Microsoft gives this version of Word free to anybody who will sign up for an account, and then anything that you get for free is typically not going to be as good as what you actually pay for, and it's it's by design. So the next thing we want to do is to create a header row. Now, a header row is going to be at the head or the top of a table, and it's going to contain identifying field names for this information that we have in this table. So what we want to do is we want to click somewhere in this first row, and then we want to come up here under the Table Design tab. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to click this header row button. And you see how it adds an additional row up here. And you can't see any borders for this header row, because a header row typically does have different formatting features. Okay, so here you could see the border of this table, and actually what it did was it took, in this case, it actually took that first row where my insertion point was at, And when I clicked header row, it turned that into a header format. So I actually want to do something differently. I want to come back and go to the Home tab. I want to click my Undo button here because I actually want to insert a row above this. So what I want to do is I click in the first row still, and under the Table Layout tab, you've got an Insert group here. You want to insert a row above the current location of the insertion point. So if I click that, it's going to put a new row up here. And this particular table design that we've got takes the first row and treats it and makes it green. And I'm going to select these cells that are in the first row, although you probably don't have to. You could click, hold, and drag, or you could come over and click just to the left of this. And you see I've got the black arrow here, and then now you can come under the Table Design tab and you can click Header Row. And you see how it takes that header row, and again, you don't see the actual cell borders in here, but you do have cells in here. Okay, and again, this is a little bit different than the desktop version of Microsoft Word. So the next thing that we want to do, if it'll let us, and the next thing they want us to do, it's not going to allow us to do. Now, one of the issues that we're going to have here is this table is going to have so much text on it that it's not going to fit on one page, and it's going to go down to a second page. So you could come up here, and if you need to pause the video for a moment, you can pause at any time to catch up as I'm typing, but I want to come into each of these cells and type in company name, and then I can hit the tab key on my keyboard to move to the next cell. And what I want to do here is in this cell, this is going to have the first name in it. So I'm just type in first name, last name, hit the tab. This is the phone number. This is the current. Now, here's one of the issues we're going to run into. You got current open, and you see what's happening. And what you would have to do here is, because of this, you would have to make this column wider. And if I just barely move my mouse, I could get that icon that means I've got the border or the right edge of the cell selected, and I can click, hold, and drag it. And I need to come back here and add a space between the words open and positions. And now this fits a whole lot better, but again, you see what it does to this next column over here. So then again, you would have to come and resize this. Now, by the way, in this particular case, there's one thing that we haven't done, and in the original lesson, this isn't necessarily, I don't think it tells you to do this, but we want to change the margins on this document to give us another inch of space for this table. So what I want to do is I want to go under the Layout tab, and I want to go under this Page Setup group, and I want to change my margins. Now, by default, and I haven't talked about this a lot, your normal margins are 1 inch all around, top, bottom, left, and right. I actually want to change these and use narrow margins, and that's going to give me a 1/2 inch margin instead of a 1 inch margin. So it's going to give me a little bit more space at the top, bottom, left, and right to make this table fit. And then when I do this, then I can go through and resize this and continuing to make it, a little bit more visually appealing. And again, remember, you're using the online version of this, and the online version is free, and it is never as good as the version that you pay for. And I scroll through this, it looks like all of this fits on one page now as well. So that's something else you're just going to have to learn to deal with and to manipulate the document. And I want to come over here and type here. I want to type position, title, and then hit the tab key and type in date posted, and then type in any notes. And I got a misspelled word. Now that's actually a good thing to have happen, because if you see this red squiggly line, notice in this case it says click to view suggestions. One thing I want you to understand, when you're using Microsoft Word and you see the red squiggly line, that does not necessarily mean that the word is misspelled. What this means is that this word is not recognized by the dictionary that's built into Microsoft Word. So what you could do here, it says click to view suggestions. Well, the suggestion, here's the correct spelling of the word. This is what we actually wanted. So I click on that and you see how the spelling automatically changed. So now you could look at this, and again, there's some things that we can't necessarily do to this document that you would do in the desktop version. And let's see what the next thing we want to do. And after pausing the video and looking ahead a little bit, I realized that this is about almost all we can do with this. Now, I guess there's one last thing you do. If you wanted to center all of this text, you could take your mouse and move it over here to the very left edge of this row and click to select. And if you do that, then you can come up and go under the table layout tab. And under this align group, you've got several buttons. And as you roll over these, the ones that are in this second column allows you to center text vertically, and in the center row allows you to center text horizontally. So if you wanted something centered, the text, if you wanted it at the top center, or you would click this align top center button, and you see how all of the text here moves over and makes it look a little bit nicer. If you wanted everything aligned at the top left like this, you would click this, and by default this is how it aligns. If you want it in the dead center, you can click the align center button, and that puts everything in the exact middle. But I want to come up here and click align top center and take one last look at this. And this looks pretty good, especially the fact that all of the text actually fits on one page. So even though a second page is displayed, you could actually go under your print settings, especially if you were trying to print this out. Now in the desktop version, it would give you an option to print, and it will here too. It gives you an option to print only one page. So if you don't want to print out a blank piece of paper down here, which isn't a big deal, you could, but what you would have to do to make that happen is over here under the pages, you would have to change that from all to custom. Now, by the way, I'm using Google Chrome for this lesson. If you're using a different browser, and most of you probably are not, but if you are using Microsoft Edge or Mozilla Firefox or Safari, the dialog box that opens up when you go to print would probably look a little bit different. But you want to find custom pages, because in this case you would just want to print out page 1. So you could type the number 1 in here, and you see that the second page goes away, and then you can just click print, and then just this first page would print out. Now, I don't really want to print this out, so I want to hit cancel. Now, the last thing that I want to show you is actually going to require that we go back and open up that very first file that we were working with called tables, because there is one last thing that you need to see that you really can't do very easily with this file that I just gave to you. So because we're done with this client's file, you can go ahead and just close that out, and because this is on your OneDrive account, it should save automatically. I'm going to go back into my work folder, and here's the tables file right here, and I just want to click it to open. And I want to show you how to merge cells and how to split cells. So sometimes you might have cells that you want cells to be bigger, whether you want them to be wider or you want them to be taller. What you could do is to use the merge cells feature to merge cells together. So for example, if I wanted these 4 cells right here to be one big cell, what I can do is to click them and to select them with my mouse, and then I can right click on them, and over here on my mini toolbar, over here, let's see, well, the merge button isn't, actually it's down here on this. So on this, on your quick menu, you got where it says merge cells, and all you got to do is to click it, and then those 4 cells merge together. And then if you wanted to merge these cells together right here, you would select them and repeat the process. And I'm right clicking my mouse to get that to open up, and now it says merge cells, and then there you go. Now let's say that you wanted to split these cells. What you could do is to click somewhere in this cell, and then you can right click, and you see here where it says split cells. Now because you can only split one cell at a time. So if you wanted to split this cell, when you click split cells, notice how here you're getting asked, do you want to split this by numbers, or do you want to split this by columns or rows? So let's say I wanted to split it not into 2 columns, but I want to split it in 2 rows. I can change this 2 to a 0, or actually to 1, because it's still going to be in 1 row. But you want it to be 2 rows, 1 column. I think I just misspoke a second ago. But when I click OK, you'll see how this splits into 2 cells. Same thing down here. If I want to take this cell and I want to split it into 2 rows, I can right click, then I get split cells. And this time I want to split it. I'm going to go ahead and split that cell into 2 columns instead of rows. So when I do that, you see how it goes back and it splits that cell and makes it 2. So that's how you split cells and merge cells together, and those could be very useful features to you. Now again, you need to remember that using this online version of Microsoft Word, it's not quite as flexible as what you would get if you were compared to the desktop version. But if this is all you've got, then you're not going to be able to do this. So anyway, that is it for the lesson on working with tables. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.